Welcome to Episode 5 of the Schaefer Creative Podcast. This is the third edition of Conversations with Creatives. My guest in this episode is a young character animator named Guillaume Blackburn. I first met Guillaume while working at Studio Pascal Blay many years ago, and for the past year we've worked together at Tonic DNA on a really nice project for one of the major studios. More news about that when it's released next year. So how'd you get your first job?
I basically made the round of all the studios with my demo. I made a demo. It took me a few months to make a demo. I put together all my best work, and which was not really good at the time, but it was good enough for a demo. And I went to Pascal Blay Studio, and when I got in, I was like, oh my god. Like, the ambience and the way it looked was so amazing that I'm like, I gotta come back here. And I really pushed. So I went in and like, can I get a test or anything? And Phil Anderson gave me the honeybee test. So what did I do with it? I did it 4 times.
Of course you did.
Yeah. So I did the honeybee test. I brought it in with Phil. Phil showed me like all those things, like to do the cleanup and the in-betweens, and I went back, did it a second time, and I was still at school. I was still on my second year at Concordia. I did that all while I was starting to do my final film, basically, which I never finished because I was doing the honeybee test so many times. But it made me learn, right?
Yeah.
I'm learning more in those 2 months of reworking that test than I've been for the past 2 years at school. And I'm like, I gotta go back there. So I went back to see Phil, and I went basically 4 or 5 times there before like they kind of realized I was there, and they kind of offered me to do something. I was not hired. I was just hanging around. Phil was showing me stuff, and a director asked me, "Hey, do you want to do these paint little fruits in the backgrounds for a commercial with fruits?"
Yeah, I think I was there at that time. I was passing through. I remember the fruits being painted on something.
It was Manu.
Yeah.
Manuel. I don't remember his last name. Who asked me if I wanted to do that. And there was a little bit of rotoscoping to do. I mean, cutting out characters on pictures. So I did that, and then that was my first job. And I brought it back, and basically they threw it out because it was not part of the... They actually cut those scenes out of the project. And I was approached by Bernard, and he asked me if I wanted to do compositing because basically Manu was leaving. And I'm like, well, yeah, why not? I'm going to do anything to be in the business. I want to put my foot in the business.
Yeah.
And 3 years after that, I was still doing compositing.
Wow.
And then bit by bit, I took like cleanup jobs, and I would do it at night and on weekends. And Al started giving me animation because I was telling him like, I had all those conversations about animation with him. He saw I was passionate, so he would give me animation jobs. And it was a little too much, though. I mean, doing compositing and trying to do that at the same time. I mean, compositing I find is it's the work in the business. It is the most underrated.
Yeah, totally.
It's crazy. You got to fix everything.
It's also extremely time-consuming.
Yeah.
And brain-consuming.
And a lot of productions, what happens is they actually they don't put enough time in the production schedule for compositing.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're sort of like me, because when I got out of school, I got into animation through the production angle.
Yeah.
Even though I was an artist.
Yeah.
I never went to art school. I didn't want to go to art school. I thought, all the art schools I had at my disposal were all awful. So I focused on film. And so I got production, doing production management, running things, and slowly I had artists taking me under their wing, and guiding my formation. They were telling me, take this class from this instructor and nobody else.
Yeah.
And so I would be taking all these classes, and then they'd be training me on the job. They'd give me little bits here and there, and that's where I learned that.
What's cool about animation is this is what's as close to story before storyboard. Because like you got a scene, you got to make a story out of that one scene that connects the other ones together. It's a small little story, right? That's what I like about it, and that's why I keep wanting to do it, is because every time there's a new scene, it's a new story. I'm trying to figure out the problem in the story. What's the conflict, and how do they resolve it, or do they resolve it a scene later, or there's always this aim that we have. I don't know if you feel the same way. You never get there, and it's just it's annoying.
There's always something. I mean, I think it's our nature to want to always have our aspiration higher than our actuality.
Yeah.
Right? So we're at one place, but we know that we can do better.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing when you talk to painters. Painters, even though they have a career painting, they're always striving for that better painting.
Yeah.
Even to their death. We need that. Otherwise, if we weren't aspiring and we got comfortable, I think once you get comfortable, then you become boring.
Yeah. But also, there are also those moments where you work hard on something and you've been redoing it. Like when I do little illustrations for myself, because that's what I do in my spare time, is I basically work on little illustrations. I never work on anything big anymore because I might eventually, but it's just like I've been disappointed too much with bigger projects. So I try to get just like little illustrations. I know I can finish them and I can push them further. While if it was like a long story project, then I don't feel ready to do it yet, because I don't know. I'm too hard on myself to finish it and be satisfied. At some point, I know I will be able to do it. It's just right now I do little short things, and
you just need to take your time because you're still young.
Yeah, of course.
You've got many productive years ahead of you. Your most productive years of your life are ahead of you. Take it one step at a time.
That's
a little
it.
bit of growth on the next time, because you're right. If you jump in too far, chances are you're going to flounder. It's going to be a huge failure, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because we have to fail as artists and as writers and creators.
Yeah, but you don't want to fall so far under that you can't get out.
It depends. It depends, because sometimes that fall into that deep point forces you to climb out and do things differently. Yeah. And it's a lesson that you don't learn. So, I mean, one of my lessons that I've learned as an artist is that you're going to fall. Sometimes it's going to be deep. But getting out of it and that whole process forms you in such a way that you would not be formed as had you had it all easy and everything was going well.
It's just like at the gym, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're trying a weight that's a bit too hard, you hurt yourself, and you're like, shit, you got to restart under where you started first, and then rebuild it, and eventually you get better than you were when you hurt yourself, right?
But you work to failure, right?
Yeah.
You got to make the muscle fail, and then your muscle grows out of the
problem
failure.
is when you work that threshold after the failure is like, and then when you actually hurt it, and then you get a healing, and it's anyway.
The worst, just to throw this out there, the worst thing about taking on something that's so big
that you can't do it
is that you're working in fear.
Yeah.
And that's deadly.
Yeah.
Like painters, when I talk to students about painting, I tell them buy the biggest, cheapest tubes of paint you can find, because if you buy those expensive paints that are so pretty and you think are going to make so much difference, you're going to have such a starved palette, you're not going to be using it the way you want to, and you're going to be failing to begin with.
Yeah. And working in fear, when you think about it, you want to be happy, right? We all want to be happy. And if you take something that's too heavy, you're basically putting yourself in a miserable position where you're not going to be happy during the moment you're creating it. And it doesn't matter the result, right? Because what's the point of having a good result if you haven't been happy while you were doing it? And you want to find a sweet spot where you can keep doing it forever, and you still get the result that you want out of it.
Right. But sometimes you don't get to that until you've laid the groundwork of grunt work and working hard and failing and being miserable in it.
You gotta be miserable.
But you love it so much because you see the light at the end of the tunnel. You see the goal.
Well, you still have that aim that you had, and it
pulls you through it.
It's so.
It is a challenge to be an artist because these things aren't articulated very well for students and people, even professionals. They struggle with it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a professional and you're struggling with it, right?
All the time. Sometimes you work really hard on something and you redo it many times and you actually get satisfied. Like, I actually am able, when I do little illustrations for myself, no contract, I'm not paid, I just do it for the fun of it. Because I don't have a deadline, I can push it and push it and push it, and I actually get to a point where I'm satisfied. And sometimes I look back 10 years after at what I've done, and it's still valid. And I like that feeling of actually having be able to hit that mark that I wanted.
Yeah.
And after that, like, obviously I look at it and I'm like, I could have done things differently or a little looser, or that's usually what's missing, is it's not loose enough, right? That's what happens when you work really hard on something. You finesse it and you lose that spontaneity. And working quick gives so much energy and result in an image or any work. For writing, I think it's the same thing. Is if you're able to write or do it quickly, still in a structured way, like controlled uncontrolled, right? Or controlled lack of control, it creates mistakes that are good and that you can use to your advantage, and it's so much better. And I've seen so many artists that are able to do that constantly, and it's crazy. I don't know how to do it. They're always in that mode. Like Al calls it riding the wave, right? When he animates, he's like, if you are drawing your animation drawings too slowly, you're going to lose that momentum, right? So you want to draw, and he was saying you got to spend no more than 10 seconds per drawing. And if you do spend more than 10 seconds, you got to take the pile of drawings you've done, even if there's a minute of animation, you got to take it and throw it to the garbage and start over. Because you've lost the wave. It was that wave. Once it's gone. It's gone. It's not going to come back. You're going to have to catch another wave, right?
Which is going to be that's kind of interesting.
Which is it's going to be a different scene because it's not going to be the same movements. You're going to have learned from that first wave how to balance a bit, but that wave is different. And I found that picture was so accurate on how it feels when you're doing it. The thing now is like now we're not working on paper anymore. We're on tablets. So like all those little mistakes that we're doing because we're taking too much time, we can fix them. So I find sometimes it's not as valid when I do animation on a tablet because I can cut and paste easily. It's not like with a photocopier before.
Well, I understand what he means because you sort of do have to animate at the speed of thought. Mm-hmm. The speed at which you are motivating, and that performance is not being hindered by your slowness, and that's a difficult thing because you're still doing it in slow motion, right?
Like underwater, right?
It's like underwater, exactly. But at some point, what was I going to say? But at some point, you're gonna break that flow, and for me, it's just a matter of rejigging myself, myself, and going back to where I am, and then coming forward. Because to me, it's more craftsmanship.
Yeah, me too. That's how I
can
feel
go back.
about
I can figure out where I was. I can regain the flow.
Yeah.
And I can start pushing it, and then ride it again.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I always thought that reworking something is never going to be negative for it. Like reworking it is first going to build your neurons and then help you learn, and it's also going to make your craft better. But there's people that don't have that vision. They don't have that point of view. They have the opposite point of view, which is like, you got to do it right away, finish it, and then go to something else. You can't go back to it. And that's how Al was working.
Yeah.
My brother is the same way. My brother works exactly the same way for everything in life. Is like, if I don't feel like it, I won't do it. So he does it only once he feel like it, and the feeling is not like the lapse of good feeling about doing something is never really long. So he has to get it done really quickly. Otherwise, he will never finish it.
Interesting.
And Al is the same way. If he lost the wave, as he's calling it, then he would throw it out and then start a new one.
Yeah, it's a bit extreme. I don't think he follows it.
I've seen him do it.
Have you really?
Yeah. A pile of paper. He's like, fuck it, like, scrap that and start over. And he was telling me, like, if you spend more time than 10 seconds on a drawing when you animate, the rough pass, obviously.
I mean, yeah.
Then throw it out. Start over. You have learned parts of what you were trying to do already in the first time you did it, so you'll go back through that path on the second time. It's just, I guess he's trying to get that spontaneity also, because you always do better drawings quickly, I think.
But also, if you're taking more than 10 minutes per drawing, then it shows that your mind is not where it should be, because you're on the details and not the
you're
not the
thinking
attitude.
about something else.
Yeah. Interesting. I studied under a painter named C.W. Mundi, and he took that principle of painting that says build then destroy, build then destroy. So he would paint something, block it in, and then he would take a rag and smudge it out.
Yeah.
And he would paint again and then smudge it out. And he does some interesting stuff in that technique, but I guess there is a degree where we build something, we realize it could be better. Let's do it again.
Yeah. What happens when you work like this is you discover what you want to do as you do it, right? Most of the time for me is I know what I want to do. I already have it in mind, and I'm trying to get there. It's two opposite approaches, right? One is you're discovering what you're going to get, and then it leads you to the result, which you don't know what it is until you get there. Or you already know what the result is, you see it in your mind, and you want to replicate that on paper, which is like never exactly what you had in mind anyway. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So tell me about your childhood. When did you get into art?
Or animation. I think like anybody for drawing I've always been drawing. I was always praised on my ability to draw. At school, by my parents, by my family, my grandparents. I mean, my brother and I were always seen as the artist's kids, right?
Oh, so your brother's an artist.
Well, he doesn't pursue art as a career. He's a programmer, but he was a much better drawer than I was, and he was more like the type like Al, like it's natural. So like even now, he can draw like someone who has like 25 years of experience. I wouldn't say that because he lacks construction and structure in his drawing, but he's able to get appeal in a drawing, which is very strange for someone who hasn't done it for a career, right? So we were always seen as the artist kids. My parents are musicians, but I was never really into becoming a musician myself. I played drums. They're mostly singers, and they sing opera, and they teach.
Really?
That's
interesting.
Singing. That's why I'm so into lip sync. If it doesn't seem like it's coming out of the mouths of the characters, it bugs me. It really bugs me. It annoys me.
Yeah.
And so my parents were singing teachers, and I was always into arts, and animation came as something I could do when I was like 16. That's when I saw The Iron Giant, and I realized, wow, if this is a movie that is done with animation, then I want to do animation because I like to draw, and this was fantastic. And I rewatched that movie over 500 or maybe 600 times. I don't know. I would basically for 5 years in a row, I would put it to go to sleep every night.
Wow.
And I remember waking up at night and it was like generic. Like every day. I would put it was like my lullaby to fall asleep was the Iron Giant. It's a very interesting thing. I don't think anybody in the world has done that.
I can't say that I know of anybody who's done that.
Yeah, that's a bit extreme. But it's just to say that I have this vision for animation. I think I share the same vision as Bradburn, and I think the same as yours is I don't want animation to be stuck in a genre the way it is still today. All those there's formulas and things that you have to see in animation films, which I find are detrimental to the film itself.
Okay, so you're a teenager, right?
Yeah.
You're loving Iron Giant.
Yeah, and I'm 16, and I decide to to start really drawing more often. Anytime I have spare time, anytime I'm not doing maths, calculus, and algebra, or chemistry, or writing an essay, I'm drawing. So I'm trying to catch up all those years that I haven't, been actually drawing all the time. I was drawing, but I was not really seriously doing it. I was like, if I do this for 2 or 3 years, I'll be ready to actually study and maybe make a career out of it. That's what I did. I did drawing. I filled sketchbooks after sketchbook after sketchbook until I was 19.
And who taught you how to do that?
No one. I don't think anyone told me. It was
just by nature. You said, I'm going to fill sketchbooks.
I think it's an idea that was instilled in my mind from all those talks I heard between adults that said, "Oh, but this artist or this musician is a prodigy," and it's like, "Oh yeah, why?" And they're like, "Oh, he wrote his first composition when he was 4 years old." I was like, "Wait a minute! At 4 years old, I was playing in dirt."
Yeah.
I'm like, I've been losing my time, right?
Okay.
And I'm like, I gotta catch up before I'm 20. And I was like, so that I can actually be the prodigy that I was not, and become the thing that I'm supposed to be, right? That I was not necessarily forced to be, and I'm gonna force myself to be it. And it was, I've pushed it to the extreme. I mean, I was telling some people you can't disappoint anyone around you. And I was saying, you got to do everything the best you can all the time without any complaint. And it was really extreme the way I was approaching life and art. I got to do it. Basically, I was ready to sacrifice my life. I was ready. I even said it many times. I'm like, if you want to become an animator or work in animation as an artist, you got to sacrifice your life, otherwise you won't make it. You got to be ready to die. And I think it's because my parents had a hard time with money also, because they were a musician and it was hard to get gigs, and they were not in a band. They were trying to get bands, but it didn't work, and it looks really hard to actually keep it going when you're in music. And they told me, especially my father said, it was really hard to be a musician. I became a teacher because there was no other option, right, to actually sustain a life like this. And he said, it's not easy. If you choose that path, it's not easy. He didn't tell me you're going to have to work hard. He didn't tell me that. He just said it's not easy. It's extremely hard. You should become a doctor, right? I'm like, okay, so becoming a doctor is going to be less work? I don't know. I'm like, what if I work as hard as a doctor, but in animation? I'm like, I have to at least try it. So I did it.
Interesting.
That's what I did. And I went at Concordia, and I didn't listen to anyone, and I just read the Animator's survival book.
Animator Survival Guide.
Yeah, Survival Guide. I read it 4 times in a row.
By Richard Williams, right?
Yeah, Richard Williams. And I read it 4 times in a row. Like, it was not enough to read it once. It's just like the Iron Giant. I had to reconsume it. So every time I found something that was teaching me something very important, I would reconsume it many times just to be sure that it stays in my mind. There's even a class, one of the best teachers at Concordia is Valery Mihalkov.
Yes, my daughter loves him. She's in his class.
He's amazing. He's such a good speaker, and he's funny because he's got a Bulgarian accent, and he gets very emotional about creativity and art, right? And how you shouldn't waste your talent and everything. And like he was the embodiment of everything I've been thinking, right? So I was like, I gotta follow this guy because he's thinking exactly the same way I am. And I took his class, and the next year, I kind of knocked in his class. I graduated from his class, right? And I knocked, and I'm like, hey, can I just get in your class and just listen? And I basically took the class twice. On my spare time, I took the class again, and he let me come in, not registered to the program.
Wow, that's great. Because were there any other good animation instructors there?
I mean, yes, but it's really hard to find someone that can tell you. For example, you're doing a storyboard. You go to an instructor, and then you say, hey, I've done this storyboard. It's not working because you're a student. You haven't worked in the industry, and you don't know how to fix it. And you're trying to find someone who's going to help you take your idea and make it work. And I never found any instructor that was able to push my ideas further. It was always like, oh, maybe you should rework that. But how? Like, how do I rework it? They couldn't show me how to do it. Like, where do I place a character in the camera? Like, what comes next? And what's the feeling when I do this? And how do I convince a certain idea? Anyway, it was really hard. And I don't blame the teachers because today I have the same problem. I think it's really hard to find people around you that can push you in the direction that you're trying to go. And, Mike Greenhold I found was really good at that as an animation director on the project.
He was fantastic.
He would take anyone's idea and make it better.
Yeah.
He was not trying to push us in another direction. He was taking the idea that we were giving him, and he was technically fixing it.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what he should be doing.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway.
So, my kids are either in Concordia or coming into Concordia, and what I've been telling them is, don't depend upon the program or the instructors to teach you.
Yeah.
You are your own teacher. You use what good you find, but you have to take it into your own hand and study yourself.
No one will do it for you.
And don't depend upon that one program to do everything you need.
Yeah.
Well, otherwise, you're going to come out of the other end, and you're going to be nowhere.
Yeah. You go in the program, and you think you're going to be surrounded by people with experience and who can lead you where you want to go. But the thing is, no one knows where you want to go. You're the only one. And if you're not sure where you want to go, no one will find it for you. And you gotta find it yourself. And the only way is to put the work in, and no one will fix anything for you.
You gotta own your own education.
That's it. You gotta. I find that everything I've learned in animation is me trying to get a concept that that is still blurry to my mind. I'm not sure what that concept is even. Like, I don't know. The concept of putting something on model when you're animating. And I find so many people have it wrong. Putting something on model, it's kind of like a mysterious thing, putting a character on model. And when you start out, someone tells you, oh, it's off model. You're like, okay, I'm going to retry again. And you trace it. you trace the model, and then you bring it back, and they're like, it's a little better, but it's still off model. And you're like, I traced it. Why is it off model, right? and you work really hard, and you show it to that person again, and at some point they're like, yeah, you got it, now it's on model. And you show it to somebody else, and they're like, it's off model. And it's like, what? Okay, this guy told me it was on model, that other guy told me it's off model. And it's like...
By the way, I've seen that drawing, it was off model.
Yeah, it was, right?
You were just too close, you couldn't see it.
Oh my god. So, I don't know exactly. Are you kidding, or you're actually talking about a real drawing?
I don't remember. Maybe.
Okay. The sum of all the different parts that I got about putting on model was you got to make the drawing appealing and in volume and respect the basic shapes of the character. The proportions can be a little off, but if the drawing has appeal and is drawn, if it's a good drawing, it has to just be a good drawing. And now it's a new mysterious concept. What's a good drawing? Well, there's all those rules that make a drawing good, right? And there's Norman Lemay that has a book, 100 Tuesday Tips, and he's going to get a second book out. I'm not sure it's maybe out already. And he's got all the tips laid out on how to make good drawing and have a line of action and all those tricks. Where to put the eyes, how to put the eyes, imagining a mask around the eyes. And
oh, cool. Send me a link and I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, cool. I'll send you the link. And you can find his tips actually on the internet really easily. You don't have to buy the book.
All right, send that to me. So what kind of advice would you give to a kid who's 13 years old, 14 years old, wants to get into animation?
My advice would be draw. And if you don't feel pleasure when you're drawing, it's normal at first. But if you never feel pleasure at all while you're drawing, I don't see any point of continuing. It has to be, you have to have enough passion so that the hard work doesn't feel like hard work. It has to feel like this is what I gotta get done to actually reach what I want to reach.
Like practicing scales as a musician.
Yes.
It's not fun.
It's
but
not super fun.
You need to know it.
But you can actually appreciate doing it. You know, like you end up appreciating it just like anything else when you work out. You appreciate what you're doing just because you're improving. And you know it's going to make your craft better. So that's my advice. My advice is just draw, because there's so many people that think they can make it without drawing. You know? There are people that make it without drawing, but it would be so much better if they actually draw on the side. Just sketch in a sketchbook. I think sketching in a sketchbook every day is like the best advice that I had in the past by other people.
Yeah, when I was taking classes while I was working going to art school, art center at College of Design, Steve Houston made us keep a sketchbook, and we had to fill 10 pages a week.
Yeah.
And looking back on that, I would say that was where I learned how to draw, was in the sketchbooks.
Yeah.
And the way I look at it now is that your sketchbook is your conversational language.
Yeah.
Preparing you so that when you get to the speeches, which are your pictures or your life drawing or whatever, those are very finely tuned, well thought out speeches. But if you're not having if you're not conversational in that language, then you're not going to do anything on those big moments.
Exactly. There's not going to be anything final.
Yeah.
It's the preparation. Keeping a sketchbook is the preparation to actually work. And I think I suffer. In the past 2 years, I've been suffering because I stopped drawing in a sketchbook every morning. I would, on the commute to work and commute to my home, I would always draw in a sketchbook. Anything. Sometimes it was just circles, just little lines, scribbles. And I could feel the days I wouldn't do it. When I would get to work, it would take me an hour to warm up, or 2 hours to warm up, and being able to actually do good drawing. But when I did do the 20 minutes of drawing in a sketchbook, I would get to work, and I was already warmed up. And it's really a muscle warm up. It's muscle and mind, but it's especially muscle warm-up. Your muscles are shaky in the morning and weak, right? So when you start sketching already, your mind is like, okay, I can control that hand, I can control that arm, and you kind of forget how to do a circle when you wake up in the morning. I'm telling you, it makes those crazy shapes. It's like...
All right, Guillaume, well, I appreciate your time. This is fantastic.
Well, thanks to you, Todd. It was great.
It's very enlightening.
I hope it is. I hope it's going to help some people.
Let's get back to work.
All right.
Be sure to check out the show notes where you'll find links to Guillaume's social media and books that he's recommended. For more about Schaefer Creative, you can find us on the web at schaefercreative.studio. Music is by Lee Rosevear.